Welcome to the podcast, Jade. This is my first guest episode in over a year, so I'm excited because I like to actually talk to people. I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a second. My context for inviting you on is that I had seen you on other podcasts, and then I saw you speak at the Contextual Safeguarding Conference in Durham, which was end of last year, which was amazing. And then quickly said hello, then became your biggest Instagram fan and kind of started to learn more about you and Power to Prevail. And then, yeah, we managed to arrange after back and forth, having a chat today in the new year. So, yeah, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but thank you very much for giving it your time today.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, my name's Jade Barnett. I'm the CEO of Power to Prevail Community. I'm a public speaker, also a youth worker, consultant, all above. But yeah, ultimately a lot of the work that I do is to support care experience young people or young people from disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. So yeah, I do. Mhm.
So, welcome. So, for people who haven't heard of Power to Prevail or don't know what it is, how would you describe
Yeah.
everything that you do there?
Yeah, so Power to Prevail ultimately is a social enterprise that supports care experience young people with preparing them for their transition into independence. So if you look at supporting care experience young people at the stages of their life where the system doesn't necessarily potentially kind of get them to a place where they are prepared for moving in on their own and what the realities of adulthood looks like. So we run a program that is an independence program, but we also do mentoring around looking at goal setting, what their next steps are, kind of being the middle person to support those young people who are ready for their next step but just don't know how to get there. So yeah, Power to Prevail kind of formed out of my own lived experience, my colleagues' lived experience, well, my employee, I say colleague, but it always feels weird saying employee at the same time. But yeah, just our both our lived experience of being care experience and what we felt like the system didn't give us. We're trying to make sure that within Power to Prevail we give that back to care experience young people and the chain can kind of continue. So yeah, it's all around independence and adulthood ultimately.
And one of the things that kind of really struck me at the contextual safeguarding conferences, Janine Davis was talking about the concept of the system, and she was like, but the system is made up of people, and so people individually have that autonomy. So I suppose for the people who are listening to this podcast, who predominantly are newly qualified social workers, but a lot are experienced social workers, can you talk a bit about, first of all, that in program of independence, because there are probably things that you are doing that could be supported or echoed maybe by social workers, but perhaps if they've not been in that position, they might not even think to go, oh, that's what this person that I'm working with needs, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, so ultimately our independent program, what we do is we look at life skills. So getting our young people to understand the reality of what it looks like living alone. So when we're talking about financial literacy, you don't really learn about that within your education time, which I feel like is actually quite important for young people to learn about. So understanding how to set up bills, how to manage bills, how to avoid debt at all costs, how to bring up your credit score, what that credit score even means. So all of the things that I guess you learn as you become an adult when you're in I say a standard family home because there's no such thing as a standard or an ideal family home anyway, but these are things you kind of learn, pick up from your parents over time, and a lot of care experience young people don't have families or parents to turn to give them that knowledge. Um, we do things such as like cooking because again cooking is a ultimate life skill that many young people don't know. When I first moved into my property I didn't know how to cook, so you're getting spending a lot of money on takeaways and X, Y, and Z when actually it's a life skill to learn about how to cook. We do things such as like healthy relationships and understanding how to keep yourself safe inside and outside of the home, which is also really important because again, being care experience, you are very vulnerable, and when you let people in and you tell them that you're care experience, experience, people can take advantage of you. Whether you are or not living in your own home, there's still an advantage people can take. I've had care experience young people when they do move into their properties, people who have like, come over and kind of like taken over their own household or been disrespectful. And a lot of the time, sometimes, again, when you're care experience, you don't really know the difference between what healthy relationships look like and what unhealthy looks like. I even think around the safety aspect, when you're young and you get your own property at 18 or 19, you're like, yeah, I've got my own place, and you invite every Tom, Dick, and Harry over to your house. And I wish someone kind of like informed me that when I moved into my first property, because you only learn from making the mistakes. However, if someone kind of gives you the heads up beforehand, maybe you might not make that mistake. So that's really important also. And also around like self-love and self-care. A lot of people don't even realize, even to be honest, adults don't realize, like, getting up in the morning, brushing your teeth, getting yourself ready, even just putting clothes on is part of the self-care routine. It doesn't have to be, face masks and spas all the time. Like those little bits and pieces are part of self-care, and they really do help you get out of a funk. And I do think that when
Mhm.
you are care experienced and there is a lot going on in your life is quite complex, it is easy to fall out of those routines of just taking care of yourself. I tell my young people all the time, it's fine to sit in bed for 1 or 2 days, but we can't be lying in bed all week or, sitting in our sorrows all week. Life is going to happen and life isn't going to get easier as you get older as well. So how do we kind of look at how we can combat those challenges when things do get hard? And that ultimately is, it can start with just your self-care and taking care of yourself and loving yourself. So yeah, and I also do think another great part of what we do at P2P is just the fact that because our independence program is group, it's not one to one when they first start with us. It's a group program, and it really does help them see that there's other young people that are going through similar things to them, and they have a community to talk about, what they're going through, what they wish they had, and just that community piece is also really important because again, like some care experience young people can move in silo because they don't want to talk about the fact that they're care experience, or they don't think that there's people that can understand where they're coming from. And I do think that it is really important for young people to connect with other young people who are care experienced because they can really find their community within that. So yeah, and then we also talk about the rights and entitlements, and I feel, I guess, like for newly qualified social workers or experienced social workers, it's really important you educate our young people on their rights and what they should know. So many times, so many of young people don't know what their care offer is, or their care offer changes, and no one tells them, the updates on what's going on or what they're entitled to in terms of moving on grant or they're moving in grant, how much money they should be entitled to, or even how to save money, like, if there's any discounts that they can get as being care experienced, or any opportunities that they can take on that might help them later on down the line. Those are really, really important because I feel like when I turned 19 and my PA kind of said to me, oh, you're too independent, so, we're gonna kind of close your case kind of thing. Um, I felt like, what does too independent even mean? There's always information to know. There's always information that will be really helpful that my PA passed on to me that I can, then use and be able to support myself. So I think it's really, really imperative that, you do your part to make sure that your young people know as much as possible. Obviously, there's always things that they've got to learn, and at the same time, again, you do learn from experience, but I think the best way to support your young person is to prepare them as much as possible. And if you can just give some information or signpost them to people who will be able to give them that information, that's really going to help them in the long run, and they will be really grateful for it. Because yeah, it's just a necessity that you need in life to just learn. So yeah, I think that's kind of like a sum up of what we do on J2A. And yeah, it's worked really, really well. And all our young people, I've been really grateful for the knowledge that they've been able to learn because if we didn't give them it, would they ever have it? So yeah, that's kind of like what we do and what I feel like is important for social workers to make sure they do. I think as well with PAs, it's I always wonder, like with PAs, there's no. I do think it's really important they have some type of like youth work knowledge added to their like
Mm.
regime. Because I do think when you're working with young people, especially at the ages of when you get your PA, it looks very different from when you're a looked after child. The support is very different, and I feel like my youth work experience of being, in the field, being in the charity sector, being on the front line has really helped me engage with young people a lot better. I've been able to create long-lasting relationships with them, not just give them knowledge, but those long-lasting relationships. And I know sometimes PAs struggle and social workers struggle because, caseloads are really high. But I think that piece of like experience and that knowledge that you can give to a young person through being a youth worker or being on the ground or being a frontline practitioner can really, really help with strengthening those relationships and kind of like getting yourself and that young person to a place where they feel comfortable coming to you about disclosures or what's going on in their everyday life so you can kind of support them moving forward. So yeah, that's something that I think is important as part of like the social work realm to have somewhat of experience, even if that looks like volunteering and you go into a
Mm.
youth club and volunteering because it looks very different from the work that you would do in social work, but it really will help with kind of like that relationship building piece. So yeah.
I think you can tell, and I don't know if it's always a necessity, but I think you can tell when someone's had work before social work, or
Yeah.
if you've worked in like residential support work, or
Yeah.
it's called, I don't like support work because it's kind of, there's like this hierarchy, isn't it? And when I was a support worker, then you have like a key worker, and then you have the social worker at the top, but actually it's usually the person who is maybe least respected that is
Yeah.
actually closest to the, that has the most
100%.
information.
Yeah.
And probably similar with like youth work, it's like there's now, it feels like there's a much bigger movement of like respect around what youth work actually is, but I don't think it's historically been there, and that it just feels off because, yeah, like I said, that's usually the person who is closest to the ground, the person who has the most kind of knowledge about the context and what's happening, not just for individuals, but for
Yeah.
groups of people. And I
Yeah.
think it's really important for social work and everybody, but to really respect that knowledge that they have. And knowledge isn't just about you've got a particular job title or you're a registered professional. And there's so much that needs to be shifted in terms of whose information we think is most important or whose knowledge is most important. I don't know if you see that through in your youth work at all, or if there's, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it's not just me, the hierarchy.
Yeah, no, there is definitely. I feel like I think it does depend if you're working in a big charity or a big youth, like for example, there's organizations out there that have got loads of youth clubs under their belts or loads of community hubs under their belts, or they're much bigger than grassroots organizations. I think those are when I've experienced a bit of hierarchy, and the people who are probably at the bottom of the food chain, the one that are closest to the young people, the ones that do the groundwork in order to make sure that the company actually keeps running, are the ones that are probably not favored or not appreciated as much as those who are higher up the food chain, which actually to me is totally wrong anyway, because without the people on the front line doing all the groundwork, the people at the top wouldn't be able to do what they're doing. And ultimately, they should get their accolades for it because it's not easy being able to support tons of young people. Each of them are unique to themselves. They all have problems of their own. And when you are a youth worker, you're not just a youth worker. When sometimes people think that youth work means that, oh yeah, you just have fun with the kids and you no, like you still have to deal with safeguarding, you still have to deal with the fact that, again, every young person comes with different challenges. You might not be that exact right person to support with that challenge. So you have to go out and source the help, and you do that in your free time a lot of the time as well. And yeah, but I do think that youth workers and people who are on the front line actually hold so much experience and expertise and know what the young people need and want, because they're right there with them every step of the way. Um, yeah, so yeah, I do have experienced it before, but I think when you're in a smaller organization, there's less of that because you all kind of are so close together and you kind of really appreciate like the help that everybody's different role has to play in your own role. So yeah, but it does get a bit complex when you are in a bigger organization. And again, loads of restructures happen and all of that stuff, which again can really, someone that's been in an organization for like 20 odd years and all of this stuff, and then a restructure comes and they're probably the first one that's going to be pushed out because not necessarily taken into context that they've been there for how many years, but they might not be young anymore, or they might not be as the ideal person for the role. And yeah, that can be really that can be really, really heartbreaking, especially when you're given so much to your work. So yeah, it there was a lot of complexities with it, but
Yeah. And I guess that feeds into like when we think about whose voice is being listened to or whose voice is considered to be the most important, that then feeds back into actually it's children and young people who are the most important people in their lives and know themselves best. And you know, the message again and again repeated, whether it's in serious case reviews or in training, is actually children's voices aren't
Mhm.
heard.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in what do you think people listening, and me included, can do better
Yeah.
or do differently to make sure that we're actually first like listening to the most important voices, but then kind of yeah making space for people's voices to be heard. Like what does that mean to you? Because we hear that phrase all the time, don't we? We need to hear children's voices.
Yeah.
Like what does that mean to you in your experience?
For me, I feel like when we're talking about listening to children and young people's voices, I don't think it's just the listening aspect. I think it's about the action aspect also. You can listen to a young person rant about, what's going on for them and, what they're peed off about or whatever it is or what they're upset about, but it's then how you take that information and how you move forward. It's about, not over promising because again, that can cause mistrust. But I think it's just about hearing them, say to them, okay, I've heard X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm hearing. Like, am I getting this right? Okay, what do you need from me in order to solve this problem or potentially solve this problem, or how can we move forward? And sometimes, not all the time, young people want you to solve a problem. Sometimes they just want you to listen and you to actually hear them and be empathetic and understand. But then there's also times where they actually want something to happen because of what has happened to them. And it's about telling them, okay, I've heard you, I've listened to you, and these are the things that I'm gonna do at this point of time to be able to either solve the problem, or I might not be able to solve the problem, but how can we take little steps to improve the issues that you're going through? I think for me, a lot of the time is what I found was I would tell my social worker problems and she'd be like, yeah, 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 okay, like, I'll sort it out. And then the sort out never happens. And then I got into a habit of being like, well, there's no point me talking about what I want to be fixed or issues that I'm having if there's never any groundwork or action being happened. And, it got to a point where I was kind of like, social services will tell me they're going to do X, Y, and Z, and I know they're not going to do it. So there's no point me getting my hopes up or me thinking that I'm going to be at a placement for 2 weeks or whatever when I know I'm going to be at the placement for longer, or I know I'm going to have to keep following up or chasing up. So I think it's really about that action piece and just being honest and open. I feel like if you can't solve a problem or you're running into barriers or there's been a pushback or I don't know, management has said no to X, Y, and Z, it's about being honest with that young person regardless of how you think they're going to react to what you're going to say, because the longer you don't tell them, the more they're going to resent you or the more they're going to be angry with you. And actually, the more you're honest with them, the stronger your relationship actually gets built. I find when I work with the young people I work with, we're not social workers, so we have to deal with a lot of social workers, and a lot of the time I'm the person that has to kind of relay the information from the social worker to the young person, especially challenging information that I know my young person is probably going to kick off and shout and whatnot, but I'm still going to tell them, because if I don't tell them, I could run in the risk to ruin the relationship I've built with them. But also, it doesn't give consistency for the young person. It puts them in kind of like this limbo of, it's at the end of the day, it's their life. And why should they not get filled in about their life or what's happening around them, or, whether or not things are moving forward? I think updating people at young people at every single stage in their life is really important, even if they're children. And I think again, like there's this um persona that children don't understand and they won't get it, when actually you can frame conversations with younger children to help them understand. And that's your duty as a social worker. And also, I'd say that's my duty as a youth worker. I work with young people who are 16 plus at Power to Prevail, but at my youth club I work with young people who are like 13 in like year 8, or 8-year-olds. I would still relay the same information, but I would just do it in a different way. And I think the more you get used to having those uncomfortable conversations with young people, or get used to being as honest as you can and as transparent, that's when you kind of really have like broken the code. Because I do think a lot of the time when I look at my own lived experience, I feel like my social worker just feared telling me things because she was scared of how I was going to react, and that just drove me more and more away from her. And I actually built better relationships with the support workers and carers that I had, because they were honest with me. They never kind of like sugarcoated anything, and that's what I really needed. So yeah, I think that's my most important part when we talk about like hearing young people or listening to young people. It's about that action part. It's not just about that first stage or just listening and taking notes. It's about actually like actioning things and giving them results. And even if you can't give results, give them updates, give them why, give that why piece. And I think also when we're thinking about, LAC meetings or reviews or whatever that may look like, um, if a young person doesn't want to necessarily come to that meeting, or you feel like it's best to not have them there, it's about having that in-depth conversation with them before, making sure they understand why that meeting's actually happening. Because a lot of the time when you speak to young people, children and young people, they don't even know what their LAC meetings actually mean, or what a care plan looks like, or what it's even for. I think it's really important you sit with them and speak to them and get them to a place where they understand what those meetings are for. So then what they say or what they want to be brought into that space is actually it actually matches with what the meetings are about. So if they don't want to be there, and they don't, some young people don't. I'm quite vocal, so I would go to those meetings and shout as much as possible to try to make myself heard. But not every young person is like that, so they might not want to sit in those meetings, but that doesn't mean that their voice can't be included. And whether that is through, maybe it's a picture that a young person designs, or maybe it's a poem that a young person reads, or maybe it's kind of like, bits and pieces of words and feelings that you bring into that meeting. But even so, if you do have that information and you bring it with you, make sure it's actually said in that meeting and taken into context, and it's not kind of just an extra piece of information that gets thrown in at the end. Is actually going back to that piece of what the young person has said and relating that to everyone in the room, so they're all clear on the same page as you are with your young person as well. So yeah, that's what I would say.
There's loads there. I guess my first thought is actually that we just need to change what we say, because we often, like you will often see in local authorities or whatever it is, it will be listen to children's voices. And what you said, actually, we need to move beyond that. We have to listen, but we have to act as well. And then the idea of that, just giving updates, because Uber, I gave this example in training. I mean, we'll move the ethics of Uber aside, but Uber is considered more successful because you can track your journey. So you could either you book a taxi and you think, well, I want them to come in 20 minutes, but I'm here waiting. I don't know when they're going to arrive. I'm only going to know when they get there.
Yeah.
Whereas Uber, you book it and you follow the journey. So even if it could be late, at least you know where your car is. And that's one of the many reasons why it's considered to be so successful. And it's not that dissimilar, that this idea, and I get it because I've felt it before, of like, I really don't want to I don't want to update that person again and tell them that we haven't got any further,
Mm,
because I've done everything that I need to do on my side, but my manager said no, or whatever it is. So that fear of having to say, I'm so sorry, we're no further, would maybe prevent me from picking up the
mm,
phone. But in actual fact, that's just, you just have to pick up the phone. And, you know, it's horrible then to have to relay that information, but it's much worse for the person on the other end to
yeah,
just have no idea what's
yeah,
happening.
yeah.
So I think that's really
100%.
important for anyone listening, to move past your discomfort and think about the person, whether it's
Yeah,
an adult or a child, at the other end of it.
yeah.
And then, oh, what was the other thing that I was going to say? This is why I can't hold information in my head. You talked about the listen and act. You talked about the like updates,
Yeah,
and then, oh, having children in the meeting. So
yeah.
one of the things that I notice in practice is, if you have a meeting, right, you have a form for the meeting, you might have people who attend, updates, the plan, and at the bottom would be the child's views. So naturally, what happens for social workers is they work through in the order of the write up. That means if something kind of runs over, the child's views, which are the most important part, are at the end. So it feels like it's quite rushed. And all people need to do is start with that. But
Yeah,
sometimes we're so kind of fixed on the order of the form that we don't like it's like when you're under stress, you lose that flexibility. But actually, when you start with the child, whether they're in the room or whether they're not in the room, it kind of sets the tone for the meeting, which I guess what you're talking about, that kind
yeah.
of, why are we here, like, who are we here for? If they're not in the meeting, can we even write their name down on a piece of paper, like just something that centers that child
Hmm.
visually for everybody?
Yeah.
Massively shifts, the way everyone speaks, even if, and it shouldn't be different. I read a journal recently, and it was about, like, from the contextual safeguarding team, and they did research on meetings, and they had a kind of role play meeting, and then they had children watch it and give reactions as the meeting was going on to things that were saying. And it was a really kind of good way to trigger us thinking about how we have meetings in and
Mm,
around sort of children and young people. But that's so helpful, I think, for people listening. How important do you think it is for people working with children and young people to learn from those who have been through that process,
okay.
who have
Yeah.
lived experience of care?
Okay. Um, really important. Super important. I
And they led you
highly
into that one. You're
recommend.
not going to be like, that's not important at all.
No, yeah, I feel like it is super important. Not only just because of I all so my reason being is because at the end of the day, really and truly, you should always learn from people who have gone through what you're then kind of, I guess, hopefully, I would hope that social workers, people who want to become social workers, want to be in this space because they want to make some change. They want to be a part of the chain of people who are making change to the system or being of support to those children in the system. And really and truly, the only way you're going to really understand in a wider context on what the system looks like or how the system treats children and young people is by asking the children and young people who were once in it. I do think that I don't think everybody's lived experience is different. So some people are gonna say that, the system, they might have had social workers who were amazing, who are an amazing support system to the young people, and you might meet people who have had social workers who are awful. But I think there's also learning that you can take from both of them, both of those situations, to then bring into your own practice, because you can see from one lens where it's really worked and really what, that young person got from that social worker that allowed them to have such a good experience. And then you also learn from the aspect of someone who didn't have an amazing social worker and what that social worker didn't do for that person. So you can take that into context and kind of put it into your own practice and what you should and you shouldn't do. I also think there's also a part of understanding how the system changes, if any changes have happened. I know when I was in the care system and I was looking at my own properties, the bidding process looked a little bit different to what it does now. And I think that can also give you some knowledge and expertise on how that shift has happened, and also how you then continue to give information to young people. Maybe it kind of sparks your mind to think about, actually, I haven't thought about that, or actually, maybe I should go and, fill myself in a little bit more in terms of expertise and knowledge, and gaining more of that to make sure I know how to relay that information to the young people, or how I kind of move forward with my relationships with young people. So I think it's really, really important. But again, I do think it's that action piece. There's one thing going and speaking to loads of people who have lived experience and taking on their views and X, Y, and Z. But if you're not actually, if there's no purpose for it and you're just doing it just because, then you kind of defeat the point of the whole action piece of actually taking it on board and actually using what you now know to make change or be a part of change. So yeah, I highly do recommend, but then at the same time, I think that you really need to think about whether or not this is actually purposeful and I'm doing this because I actually want to improve my practice, or are you just doing this to be able to go back to your manager and say, oh well, I've spoken to X, Y, and Z about their lived experience, so yeah, I've now kind of done my part. Well, no, there has to be like a purpose to why that is something that you want to do. Yeah,
Yeah. I
basically.
listened to the Care Leaders podcast, and Luke Rogers, who's on it, talks about how he doesn't share his story
Yeah.
anymore, and I think that's really interesting because there can be this sort of tokenism
Yeah.
now, which I think we need to be really aware of as a profession, and
Yeah.
how we move away from that. Because, like you
Yeah.
say, it's you can't just go to a talk
Yeah.
as someone with care experience and then come back and then not do anything
Yeah.
differently. It's a bit like what you said, you can't just listen, you have to act as well. It
Yeah.
works on all those sort of
Yeah.
accounts, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, 110%. And yeah, tokenism is real. And sometimes I feel like people don't even realize that they're doing it as well. I know Luke, and actually I wish that if I was to turn back time, I think I would probably tell my story a little bit different to how it was. Um, I think, I've always been happy to share my story, but I feel like now I'm in the position of kind of going through the same motion that Luke's going through, in terms of I don't really want to talk about my story too much, because it's not just, it's my life, and at the same time I'm sharing a lot about my life. And yeah, while that's great and while that can build change, I'm tired of going into spaces speaking about my experiences, and I don't see like these services changing, or I don't see these services coming back to me to tell me updates on what's going on with their service. It's kind of like sometimes they might want people to feel things, and they want people to have a, you know, a sob story in on the front stage, and people feel and they get emotional and X, Y, and Z, and yeah, that's great, but all that emotion build up to then do nothing with it doesn't make sense to me. So I feel like if I could go back in time, I probably would be reluctant to tell my story as much as I have done in the past, because it does open wounds for you also being care experience. But I also feel like you have to be careful, because sometimes people just, again, just want a sub story. People don't actually look at themselves and think about how I can change, or how I can improve, or how I can get better. I've walked into rooms where people have been like, oh yeah, like, especially now I do a lot of cultural competency training, especially being, black in care experience and a female. I struggled a lot with my identity when I was in the care system, and it was really hard for me to get the support as a as a global majority young person, and that's a young woman, and that has hair and has cultural needs that need to be met. It was really difficult to me for me to navigate that space, and I walk into spaces now and I deliver that training, and loads of people be like, oh, why is the training around race? Like, why is it a thing around race? We all know about race and da 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 da, but people are very arrogant to understand, like, and actually stop for a minute and really realize where they can improve their practice. There's always ways to improve. There's always ways to grow. And what's the conversation around, oh, why are we talking about race? Because it's a real thing. Like it's a real thing. You're gonna have young people that walk into your life, into your service, that are gonna be black or Asian or whatever, Indian or whatever they look like. Like you have to talk about race. And if you're uncomfortable about talking about race, then right there and then there is an issue that needs to be sorted, or there's an issue that needs to be overcome, because we should never be still talking about, oh, why are we still talking about race, because it's a prominent thing. And I guess also that lived experience piece, me being able to bring my own story into that room and talk about my experiences, and then to be kind of like, I guess, pushed back by people that still have this analogy that, oh, we shouldn't be talking about this, or we shouldn't be having those conversations. It also can take a toll on you as a lived experience practitioner. So yeah, I feel like there is quite a lot of tokenism. There's still a lot of quite of arrogancy that people do have, and it becomes quite challenging when you're always bringing your lived experience into the space, because it, as much as people might not think it hurts, it does hurt when people kind of like make remarks like that, or kind of don't really take into context why this piece of work is important, and why they should look at their work and really look at how they can change or become better. So yeah, it's I've tried my hardest now as a practitioner that's in this space. So when I get booked for things, or when I come on podcasts sometimes or whatever, I'm clear, like I'm not here to talk about my lived experience. So don't get me wrong, that's something that will come up, but I'm not going to sit and go in depth about my lived experience and about, how I entered the care system or the challenges that I've had. I'm talking from a place of not just my own bits of my lived experience, but from the fact that I am now a practitioner. I now work in the space. I now work with young people who are still going through similar things to what I was going through. And I'm here to kind of raise awareness on what should be done better and how we should do better, and looking at practices and procedures rather than just focusing on lived experience and what was hurting me and what once was, rather than looking at kind of like what we should be doing now and what we should be doing in the future. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like a I don't know if it's not like or maybe ownership's the wrong word, but like I've never been on a podcast and someone's gone to me, tell me about your childhood. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like that. That's never happened. They would always locate the questions in and around social work,
Yeah.
which it shouldn't be any different
Yeah.
for anyone else, should it? But it's this. Um, I don't know. Do people feel like they're owed a story sometimes? I guess it's that
Yeah.
same thing around
Yeah.
tokenism, which
110%. Yeah.
or maybe it's like I wonder if it's an insensitivity. Like I try and be really conscious of the questions that I ask, because I think I've been in a situation so many times as a social worker where I'm asking people the most like questions about the worst parts of their life, and I'm a
Yeah.
stranger. And I
Mm.
think you have to stay so aware of that as a social worker, because if you're not aware of it and you're not reflecting, you're just going straight into these situations and not realizing like the questions that you ask are
Yeah.
so invasive. Like it is invasive social work, particularly in child protection.
Yeah.
I think if you haven't got an awareness of that, it just can be so harmful. We just, you know, I'm really interested in the expectations that we put on children, young people to
Yeah.
have conversations. Like I home educate, so we have a visit from the home educating team
Okay.
only once a year. They should probably come more often, in my opinion. But I was telling my little boy about it. So I was like, they'll want to, he's like, they had one last year. So I was like, they're going to want to talk to you. And the first thing he said was, I'm going to have to speak to a stranger. And I just thought, he's 7. I was like,
Mm.
there's so much like that connects with social work there. And,
Yeah.
I guess like the word you used is arrogance. I would say the arrogance of thinking that you can just go into a space with a child that you've never met before and they're going to tell you everything.
Yeah.
And then feeling a sense of, I don't know, a disappointment if you haven't done that, or
Yeah.
how kind of grabbing the information from them. And I understand it from the social work perspective of feeling under pressure and wanting to safeguard and being worried about allegations that have been made. But we
Mm.
also just have to hold the rights of the child in
Yeah.
mind, don't we? And
Yeah.
it's a balance.
Yeah. 110%. 110%. And I think also it's about giving that space for those young people, children and young people, to share their lived experience when they're ready. Like
Mm,
I also as much as I hate the way some social workers write about young people or the way that young people's cases are written up, because sometimes we get sent stuff about young people, and then when we meet them live in the flesh and we get to know them over the 4 weeks they're with us, this is not the person that was written about when we first got their referral. um but I think it's about like remembering that, you know, every time you show up and be consistent and you do what you've agreed with your young people, or you go that little bit of an extra mile, they will open up. Like young people are not, they're not they're not cold-hearted people. They're just people that have really struggled with mistrust throughout their whole life, whether it's, you know, they've been able to be in situations where you know they've had their trust broken by their parents, or they've not had people that have been consistent in their lives, and you know they're always having to have strangers come. And I always used to say this, like, people come and like meddle in my life all the time and I don't have a say about it. Why would you not expect a person to not want to speak to someone when they've had to probably speak to about 10 people about their life prior to you anyway? So it's just about giving them that space. And also sometimes, you know, as a social worker, you probably do know a lot a bit about the young person prior to meeting them because you get all that information. Maybe it's about how do you build that relationship first, or, you know, put measures in place where the young person feels safe and feels comfortable to speak to you, instead of kind of like prodding pins and needles into them and expecting them to just open up like a book, when actually you do have to do a bit of the groundwork first to gain that trust with them. But then also you continuously need to keep doing the groundwork because um trust can be broken just like that, and it's about how you kind of keep that going. So yeah, yeah, I just think that people are I don't know why there's so high expectations for care experience young people, or care experience leaders should just open up their life on a book. And even if a young person, for one person, they opened up and shared a lot about them with that person, that doesn't mean it's going to be the same with you. And for you to expect that, then you've put these expectations on this young person that actually you should never have put that on them anyway, because what their relationship looks like with someone else might not look like it for you. You know, I also find it really frustrating sometimes that I've had social workers who have pinpointed like youth workers like in my team and been like, well, I know you have a really good relationship with this young person, so can you be the person who tells them X, Y, and Z, or can you be the person who has this No, that's actually your job. I can actually be there to support you, or I can tell you, you know, I know this young person really likes eating Chinese, so maybe you take them to a Chinese restaurant, or I know they really like football, so maybe, you know, paying for a football session and then having a conversation with them after or the following week is going to be a great way for you to kind of like build that relationship and be able to relay that information. But it's not something for you to then to come and ask me to be able to relay that information and put the pressure on me to do that with the young person, when actually you should kind of be learning how to navigate that space with that young person. So yeah, that can be really frustrating, and I know why people do it, because they know that, you know, you have a better relationship, but at the same time I shouldn't be doing that piece of work for you. You should be learning how to do that and how to build that relationship with the young person, because the more people that are surrounded by young people and they have good relationships with them, the better their outcomes are, because young people do need communities to support them. You know, I might be the person they turn to about finance and managing their bills and setting up their home, but that you might be the person that they turn around and really go to when they're, you know, going through a hard time, or, you know, they, you know, need someone to just be a listening ear. They need different people in different realms of their life to support them. It's not always one person that can just do all the load. So it's really important that people don't run away from having those relationships from young people and respecting their lived experience and what they share with them, because it is a really important part of a child's development to have people to support them in various or different ways. So yeah, yeah.
And then I guess linking back to that idea of expectation, I've only got two more questions. I'm conscious of your time. And linking back to the idea of expectation, what we were kind of talking about this before, and then if you don't want to leave this in, we don't have to. But as someone who delivers like training to social workers, I get lots of contacts, often emails saying, we'd really like you to come and speak at this event. It's on this day. And if I say, okay, what's your budget for that, for
Yeah,
example, because you want me to go, it's like a 2 hour train journey, four
yeah,
hours there and back, it's a 2 hour talk, whatever. Um, and they'll be like, oh, we don't have a budget, but it would just be really good exposure for you, or, it'd be really good connections. And I know other trainers that I speak to experience that. And I'm a
yeah.
white woman. I know my black counterparts who are in training, they get that all the time, way more than me. You don't have to say whether that's something you experience, but what would you say for people who are in the training space, educating people, delivering information and doing that en masse? If there's people listening from local authorities who are looking to either, book that kind of a keynote speech, what would your advice to them be, particularly thinking about people who are care experienced or people who work in the voluntary sector? Yeah, what would your advice to them be around that?
Don't ever ask people to come and get their expertise or live the experience for free. That's just awful. That's probably the most awfulest thing you could probably do, because I get it. I do also get it that, budgets can be tight and there's not enough money in X, Y, and Z. But firstly, time is money. So the fact that someone's actually coming to offer their lived experience or expertise, they're taking time out of their day, out of their work schedule, out of their own personal life to come and give you something. Where's the exchange? Like, what are they also gonna get out of it? Um, because for people just think that, it's okay for them to just be like, yeah, like come and do all of this work, which takes again time and money for free. You would never ask someone who's actually employed to come and do a job at your house. It's like, for example, a carpenter. You're not gonna go on TaskRabbit and write in, oh, carpenter, and then message the carpenter and be like, oh yeah, can you come and put up my shelves? And then they say, okay, like this is my fee, and you say, oh well, I don't have no budget. That would never happen. So for you to assume and expect that people are just going to do that for free without there being a um a transactional kind of like relationship going on, then you're wrong to expect that. So and especially, I know obviously as adults it shouldn't happen to adults either, but I definitely think as you get older you can combat those, you can have those conversations and kind of let people. I've turned down things where I've said, like, if I don't feel like it's any benefit for myself or for Power to Prevail, I'm not coming. That's just how blatant and simple it is. If I feel like it's beneficial and me not getting paid and I'm getting something else out of it, whether that is raising awareness or maybe the company has agreed to booking me again further down the line, or maybe it's, I've decided to do it because it might be less money than I'll usually charge, but I'm still getting paid for something, and it then correlates to, again, the raising awareness piece, I'll do it. But I just think that when you're an adult, you can combat and have those difficult conversations. But when you're a young person and people are asking you to do things for free, and yeah, you might want to be in this space. I remember when I first started my advocacy journey, I really wanted to take every single opportunity that came my way because I wanted to be a part of making change and sharing my experience in X, Y, and Z. Again, it takes time and it takes effort, and you should be compensated for that. And I feel like it's awful that people put young people in situations where they're sharing so much of their lives and sharing so much of their experiences, but they're not getting anything in exchange. And I also just feel like no one really understands. You wouldn't understand it unless you kind of have somewhat of lived experience that you share, how that actually makes you feel. You open this little bit of a Pandora's box and you don't know how that's going to affect the young person after. So just kind of like bringing them on and bringing their lived experience and letting them speak to all these people. And yes, it might make your audience feel a type of way. Are you actually thinking about the result of them sharing their lived experience on the young person themselves? So I don't ever think people should just expect lived experience, people, practitioners, or even people who have expertise in a certain field or subject to just come and do their work for free, because that takes time, that takes effort, that takes money, and someone has actually built their skill set and expertise to a certain level that you want them to come on. So why should they not then be reciprocated with either expenses paid for or refreshments paid for or actual, like, money for their service? Because it's unfair. You wouldn't expect someone with a job to do their job for free. So why would you expect lived experience and expertise as a kind of a job within itself? It holds weight. You're never going to be
Mm.
able to get that same information. You might be able to get it bits and pieces from here and there, but you'll never be able to get it from that particular person because they've been able to build what they've had, or their lived experiences, they're unique to themselves. So, yeah. There's no price on lived experience. That's why I
And
say.
it's not I've had, oh, my Alexa going off. Triggered her. Um, yeah, I find it quite difficult because it's not something that people are open about. So, like, I have like a podcast disclaimer now on my website, which will now like say about the guests that I have on and
Yeah,
reimbursement and different stuff. And that it like it started last year when I started really thinking about it, and I was like, do you know what? Until I've got it straight in my head and have a
yeah,
pot of money, whatever it is, to then invite people on, I'm not going to have guests on. So, but it was really hard for me. I'm me, like one person. It's really hard to then find policies or what other people do, other
yeah.
podcasts, other organizations. And it would, like, for me, I was thinking it would be so helpful for me to know what the benchmark is for other people,
Mm,
but it would obviously also be helpful for people who are talking about their lives or going on
yeah,
podcasts. And
yeah.
I have like maybe two trusted people that I know when I'm, and no one talks about money, it's always really awkward, but I have two trusted people that I know who might be doing something. I'll say, do you mind me asking how much you charge, because
Mm,
I've got no idea. Unless you have that,
yeah,
it becomes this like subsector of the social work industry where
yeah,
nobody's like talking about money. I find it, like, it baffles me. And then I think when it trickles down to the way information is exchanged or people's time, I just think we have to talk about it more.
yeah. 110%. 110%. People who are asking people to do things should never throw away from speaking about money. But I also do think, unfortunately, for speakers like myself, I definitely know there was a point where it felt really awkward talking about money. I was
Mm.
really afraid to like talk about, how much my service costs. But then the more and more I started thinking about it, and the more and more I started doing more speeches, it takes a lot out of me to prepare a speech and to, make sure I have all my notes and my presentations together. It's actually a role, like young people get paid for lived experience consultants and X, Y, and Z. Why? Because their knowledge, their experience should cost money. They should get paid for that. You're not going to be able to get the same experiences elsewhere. And this is why when I turn people away, I say to them, like, even though you're not getting a part of like my whole life experience and X, Y, and Z, what I have to offer, no one else would be able to offer what I offer, because they'll never be able to do it the same way as me. So if you can't respect the fact that this is my craft, this is what I do for a living, this is, how I'm taking care of not only myself but other young people, sharing the word about and raising awareness about how we should move forward when we're supporting care experience young people, then that's not something that I want to entertain, because I will never tell my young people to do things for free. My young people always say to me, "Oh, Jade, like, you don't need to pay us, like, we'll do it for you for free." I actually couldn't care less whether or not you feel like you could do it for me for free. I'm gonna teach you about from now that if you're doing something for me or you're doing something for someone, they should be paying you regardless. Even if it's £10 or a voucher or whatever it is, it might not be exactly what you want, but they should be paying you for something, because to me that's about respecting people's times, expertise, and experiences, and everyone should feel respected, regardless. So yeah, I stray away from, telling my young people to be a part of something, not paying them for their time, but also I think it's really important for people to just update people on the progress of how things go. I've been a part of campaigns and they put me as like the face of their campaigns, and I've been a big part of it. But then as the campaign progresses, or as the campaign grows, or as they get to go to 10 Downing Street or whatnot, no one updates me on what's going on. And for me, I feel like that is another piece of not fully actively being involved, or when you're looking at what youth participation actually looks like and the positive way to go about it. Just as well, just paying a young person to be a part of being, talking about their lived experience, and then not updating them or filling them in or re-asking them to come back or be a part of anything that you're doing. Also, I think it's tokenism. Just because you paid them doesn't mean that, oh yeah, you actually included them properly within what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a
So
really good point.
that's now even a whole nother like rabbit hole to go down. But that frustrates me also, because
Yeah.
young people are not there to be picked up and played with when it's convenient for you. They should be involved from top to bottom, regardless. So yeah,
Yeah, that's really important to say because it isn't, but we exist under capitalism. Like money is the thing that we use to place
yeah,
value, but that's not the only value, is it? So I think that's really important to say that that is one big part of it, but also it is the participation
yeah,
as well, and that
yeah.
has to have that value. And thank you for talking about that with me because yeah, when I'm like, it feels like I still hold awkwardness talking about it, but I also think it's something that needs to be talked about. So I kind of like, well, you've got to talk about it then to stop being awkward about talking
Exactly.
about it. So before, or like as we end, one of the things that I really like about your work and what you do with Power to Prevail is the kind of aspirational side of it. So I think quite often in services and systems, children and young people are viewed through this lens of risk. What could go wrong? What has gone wrong? What's going to go wrong in the future? And we're always thinking about potential like risk of harm. And one of the things that you do is kind of the aspirational. What are your goals? How good could it be? What are
Mhm.
the biggest things that you're searching for? How, I guess, for social workers who are working with children and young people, what's one piece of advice you could give them that would help them be that aspirational for young people and not just focusing on the risk, which is easy to do?
When we're speaking about aspirations, I just think it's really important that social workers just remind young people that whatever they're going through, or whatever they're kind of, battling with, or the challenges that come up in their life isn't a result of what their life's always going to look like. I think it's really important that what I call it is, I call it power experience, because at the end of the day, every hard experience that you face throughout your life, you're going to be able to overcome them, but also it's going to make you stronger. And it's not a bad thing, and it's not, you know, in the moment it might feel like it is, and it's hard to see a way to not see out of it, but at the same time, every hard experience makes you a lot stronger, and it makes you never allow that to make you feel like you can't achieve what you want to achieve. And I think it's just about reiterating that to young people all the time, and also reminding them of their qualities, because I feel like a lot of the time as well, we focus on the negative aspects of what young people come with, when actually there's quite a lot of qualities that they have. So reframing the narrative, I always used to get told, oh, you're such a loud young person, or you're such a loud young black girl, or you're ghetto, or you're this, or whatever. But actually, my voice has been my quality. Like now, I speak for a
Yeah.
living. I work with young people and take them to do conferences, and to campaign and be activists and all of this stuff through my voice. Being a CEO, getting up on stage, speaking about what we do. That's, I use my voice. So I feel like, thinking about how people speak about these young people, a lot of the time it's important for social workers to make sure they're reframing that narrative, to kind of install in the young people that actually you have so much positive qualities about you, and what your life looks like now doesn't mean that your life's going to look like that moving forward. And just because you are care experienced doesn't mean you can't be, doesn't mean you can't go to university, doesn't mean that you can't do X, Y, and Z, doesn't mean you can't now be a CEO of your own business. Like, your life is not limited to what your past was. It's like you literally have the greatness to move forward. So I think it's about just kind of like building that self-confidence. And I know it looks different on every young person. Um, because again, some young people are naturally more confident than others. But I think if they just hear someone say that to them consistently, even when things are getting tough, and even when they don't want to hear it, because at times young people will not want to hear you talk about how great they are. They're gonna get tired of hearing it, but it really does. Like it does ingrain it into their brain because they will have moments when they're like, actually, so and so told me that I'm like this, or so and so told me actually like I can do X, Y, and Z, and they will remember it. So I think it's just about that consistency of pouring into them, like the love and nurture and care and inspiration into them, because a lot of people around them aren't doing that for them. They meet practitioners, and the first thing they talk about again is their lived experience or what's going on in their life, or how they're not cleaning their rooms, or how they're not, they're getting moved to another placement, and this carer said this and this about them. I think they need more people to just like uplift them and put them into places where they can see themselves moving forward instead of always just living in the past and focusing on what's not working, basically.
Mm.
Um, so yeah.
Thank you. And so, for people who are listening who want to know more about you and more about Power to Prevail, and that actually what you were talking about, did an amazing series on Instagram with
Yeah.
like other young
Young
people,
people. Yeah.
adults talking about the goals that they've achieved and things that they've done.
Yeah.
How can people find you? What's the best way?
Yeah, so you can find me, Jade Barnett, on any social media platforms. My Instagram is Jade Barnett underscore. LinkedIn, I'm literally just Jade Barnett. Power to Prevail. You can have a look at our website. It's www.powertoprevail.co.uk. It's power number two and then Prevail. Our Instagram is the same. It's just power and then number two Prevail underscore. And we're on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, if you can find me, you can find Power to Prevail. It's literally plastered all over my social media platforms. So yeah,
I'll put all the links in the show notes, and then
yeah,
people can reach out to you if they
yeah,
want you to do a keynote that isn't
yeah,
going to be tokenistic, by the way.
no,
A keynote where they're going to listen and take action.
yeah,
They could reach out to you for training if
yeah,
they want to commission Power to Prevail. Is
yeah,
that you
yeah.
do? Is that in and around London?
Yeah, in London, we're based, and also if you ever want to refer any young people for our Journey to Adulthood program or our mentoring, all the links to our referral forms are on our site, so you can literally just get in touch. And yeah, you can always just email if you have any questions. We're always happy to answer any questions or queries because we know people might have a lot of questions, and that's fine. I'd rather you come and ask than not. So yeah, yeah, you can find us by that.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. This was great. I hope the questions were all right.
Thank you.
And yeah, thanks for coming on. I know everyone will have loved it.